Let's start with the psychology of money. What is the benefit to my life if I understand the things that are written in the psychology of money?
Well, let me start with, I think most finance books will, their answer to that question would be, when you're done with this book, you will know how to pick stocks better. You will know how to balance your checking account or what credit cards that you should use. For my book, I think when you're done with it, I hope that you will just look in the mirror and say, who am I? Which is kind of what I did with this, trying to figure out who I am and what I want and why I was insecure, why I wanted to show off to other people the car that I drove. So if you become more introspective about who you are and what you want out of life and what money can do for you and cannot do for you, and become a little bit more introspective about why you think about where you are in the social hierarchy and greed and fear and why you think about these things that you do. I honestly think that I hope at least, because it was this way for me, that when you're done with the book, that's kind of when the learning begins. Because maybe this will just spark a bit of curiosity for you to then go for a walk and think about what you want out of life and whatnot. So I think most books, when you're done with the last page, the learning is done. This, I hope, is just spark something in you that will get you to think more clearly about what you want with money and what money can and cannot do for you.
Part of that journey of understanding what you want helps you to define the word on the front of this book, wealth. What is your definition of wealth?
Well, I made up these definitions in the book. So these are just my things that I made up. But I defined rich as you have enough money to buy what you want, to pay for your mortgage, to make your car payment, to go out to dinner with your friends. You have money in the bank. Wealth, I think, is very different. Wealth is money that you did not spend, and maybe you will not spend. So wealth is hidden. It's the money that you didn't spend on a car. It's the money that you didn't spend on a big house. You didn't spend on jewelry. And that's really important because wealth that's saved up, the unspent money, is what gives you independence and autonomy and just the ability to wake up every morning and do whatever you want with your life. And so I think separating that is really important, because when most people say, I want to be a millionaire, what they actually mean is, I want to spend $1 million. That's what they mean. And when I think about being a millionaire, I think it's you have $1 million that you're not going to spend. And that because you're not going to spend it, you have this giant cushion that will give you independence and autonomy. And so you can wake up tomorrow and say, I can do whatever the hell I want today. I can work for who I want. I can work for as long as I want. I can retire when I want. The world is yours. Like, every bit of savings that you have is a piece of your future that you own. You're just buying your time in the future so that it's yours and you can do whatever you want with it. And that, to me, has always been the goal. There's a quote from Charlie Munger where he says, I never wanted to become rich. I just wanted to become independent. And that when the first time I read it, it was like, that's me too. That's what I want. I don't want a Lamborghini. I don't want a mansion and a yacht. I want to wake up every morning and just say, whatever I want to do today, it's mine. Nobody's going to tell me where to work, when to work, what to do. It's all me. And to me, for not just work, but for your family life, for your health, for your mental sanity, there's nothing more important than that.
It sounds like you're talking about your father.
My dad, he has such an interesting background. My mother too. Their background is so crazy. And I didn't realize how crazy it was until I was an adult. The early part of my childhood, when my parents were in school, we were very poor. My parents were students living off of student loans and grants. We had no money. And then my dad became a doctor when I was 12 or 13, and things changed. We were not rich, but things got very comfortable. And what was really important is that the frugality that my parents had to have when they were poor stuck with them, even after they started making a little bit of money.
They didn't buy a Lamborghini.
No. We grew up in a very modest house. It was a nice house, and we took some decent family vacations, but we always lived well below our means, way below our means.
Did that confuse you? Because you must have known that your dad had the money.
Yes, particularly when I was probably 16, 17, and I could learn how much does a doctor make? You can go look it up and figure it out. And then it was I definitely looked down on my parents at that age, because I was like, I know you can afford a better car. I know you can buy me better Christmas presents. I know we can afford a bigger house, and you're not doing it because you're mean. I think that was my view. And then it really clicked about 10 years ago. This is not that long ago. So my dad is an ER doctor, which is one of the most stressful jobs that you can imagine. It's literally people dying in your arms every day. And he did this for 20 years. And after 20 years of doing this, night shifts, children dying in your arms literally every week, he said he had enough. It was a lot. He put in his dues. He did it for 20 years, and he said, I'm done. I'm going to retire. And the reason he could do that is because he had saved up so much money. He was living well below his means. They had a very high savings rate. The moment he woke up and said, I want to be done, he was done. And that was it. And if you contrast that with so many other people, including some of his colleagues, who were also burnt out at age 60, who were also burnt out by having people die in their arms for 20 years. They wanted to retire and they couldn't because they had the bigger house, because they had the nicer car that I thought that we should have had when we were growing up. And when they quit and moved on to their next phase of life, they got so much happier. And so it was like, so that this was 10 years ago. I was in my late 20s at this point. I was like, now I get it. He was frugal, he saved a lot, and that made him independent. And the independence made him happier than any car would have done, made him happier than any big house would have done. So it's like, I think that is one of the keys to happiness. Happiness is like the most complicated topic you can imagine. But one of the big puzzle pieces is independence. And there's been a lot of work on this, studies on this, of like, one of the things that makes people really happy in life is having control over what they're doing. And it's more so the flip of side of that. It's like what makes people very unhappy in life, not having control over what happens in their future, not having control over their schedule, where they're going to work, whether they're going to get laid off. Having that uncertainty is a massive anchor and weight on your life.
And bad for your health.
Absolutely. I mean, that was a big thing for my dad too. He was working night shifts for 20 years with this. It's very bad for your health. It's not great at all. So the ability, the financial ability to just wake up one day and say, I'm done with that, is huge.
I was reading studies about this idea of autonomy because I was trying to figure out what you have to have professionally to love your work. And I came up with these 5 different points. One of them was autonomy and control. And I came up with that because I read studies where people who worked jobs where they had low autonomy and control had physiological consequences. They were more likely to get disease. They experienced stress significantly more likely to have cardiovascular problems and heart disease, which is the single biggest killer of people generally. And I thought, fucking hell, just not having control in your life makes your body shut down.
Yes. This is something that I think everybody has experienced. If they have something really stressful going on at life, they get into bed, they're tired, you can feel your heart pounding. Like the physiological response of stress is huge. It's massive. And if you have that going on every day for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, forget about it. Forget about it. There's this great quote from John D. Rockefeller. He was the richest man in the world, and he lived till I think he was 99, something like that. Maybe he was 97. And his doctor talked about why, like his key to longevity. And the doctor said, quote, he never lets anything bother him. He spends plenty of time outside, and he leaves the table when he's still a little bit hungry. That was his key to longevity. It was just, and when you read his biography, you realize how true that was. No matter what was going on in his life and the most stressful business conditions you can imagine, none of it ever bothered him. He just had ice in his veins and he could just keep going. And so I do think that's definitely one of like the keys to physical health is lowering that amount of stress. And there are not many other things in life that are going to increase the stress that you have than not having control over what you're doing in life.
Freedom. Chapter 7 of your book. This is the broadest lifestyle variable that makes people happy. Doing something you love, but on a schedule you can't control, starts to feel the same as doing something you hate. Psychologists call this reactance.
That's right. I do think there are I think the best example are CEOs who might make $30 million a year, $50 million a year, but they have no control over their time. Every single second of their day is planned and demanded by somebody else. And they have to do things that they don't want to do. If they wake up and they're tired, too bad, you got to go to your meetings today. If they wake up and they're exhausted, too bad, you have to travel to China to close this deal. Mm-hmm. They have no control over their time. And compare that to someone who makes much less, but they wake up, they can wake up and do whatever they want to do. You want to hang out with your friends? You want to sleep in? You want to take a nap at 2 o'clock? Whatever you want to do. The person who I think really sticks out in that vein is Warren Buffett, who is the CEO who makes $1 zillion a year. He's worth $100 billion. But if you dig into how he's structured his day, total control, 100% autonomy, can do whatever the hell he wants all day long. What he wants to do is get up and go to work. But he has delegated things so effectively that he can do whatever he wants. And that's not only the key to his, I think, business success, but his health, lifestyle success, and why he's 93 and still going as strong as ever.
I was thinking about my calendar when you were talking about the CEO that makes $30 million a year, but is just dragged around by his schedule. It sounds a lot like me, to be honest. I feel like the more successful I've got in my professional career, the more my calendar, the minute I wake up in the morning, I'm just like a puppet master to these little boxes on my Google calendar.
Yeah.
They drag me around the world, and there's very little. I actually said to my assistant about a month ago, I was like, Sophie, please can you do me a favor? Could you just put lunch in for 30 minutes because I'm not eating? Could you just put that in midday every day at the same time?
So you can breathe.
So I can have a little bit of a moment where I do nothing. And then also the other thing I've put in now, I have a personal trainer 7 days a week, and I've just put that in my calendar. It was before then a residual beneficiary, as was everything for me. Well, not for me because my work is for me, but it got the time that was left over when all my priorities were done. And I do reflect on that and go like, when does that stop? Because it's clearly not going to stop when I make money because I have the money. And B, how much control do I actually have? And you know what I do sometimes? I think I've noticed this about myself. I think sometimes I cancel things just to prove to myself that I still have control.
See, that's great. See, that's a good thing. There's a quote from Nassim Taleb where he says, like, you are wealthy when the money that you deny tastes better than the money you accept. So someone comes to you with a business deal and you say, no, thanks, I don't want it. When that tastes better to you than accepting the deal, it feels better to you. That's like one definition of rich. There's another great quote from Taleb where he says, the world is split evenly between people who don't know how to start making money and people who don't know when to stop making money. And I think there are a lot of people that are watching this, that are in kind of our field, who are easily in the latter. They have all the money that they could ever want to spend, or maybe not that much, but they have more money than they ever thought they would have. But for every goal that they hit, whenever my net worth is X, all my problems are going to go away. Everything's going to feel great. And then they hit X and they just keep moving the goalposts down and down. So I write in the book that like the hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. It's the hardest thing in the world. It's hard for everybody because virtually everybody thinks if my net worth or my income was this level, I'll be fine. I'll feel great. No more problems. I'll wake up every morning with a smile on my face. And then if you're lucky enough or you work hard enough to get there, you realize that's not the case at all. You're just going to keep pushing it forever.
Have they done studies to test that in terms of analyzing whether people's goalposts move off into the future, even when they're like billionaires and whatever?
I mean, here's the broadest way that I would frame this up that has been studied. If you look at America today, the average household, adjusted for inflation, is making twice as much money than they were in the 1950s. Adjusted for inflation, the average household double the income that they were back then. And we're less happy. The statistics that try to measure happiness over time, it's not an easy thing to do, but we're less happy today than we were back then. And this is why, like, look, can money buy happiness? Yes. And to some extent, does it? Yes. Like people who are in abject poverty are not as happy as people who are covering the basics and they have food and shelter, et cetera, et cetera. But over time, when the society is getting richer and you're comparing yourself to other people, and maybe the average American's income doubled, but so did their neighbors, so did their coworkers, so did their siblings. So you just automatically adjust to that. I talked about Rockefeller before, John D. Rockefeller, who died in, I think, the 1930s. He was worth, adjusted for inflation, almost $500 billion during his day, adjusted for inflation. But he never had, during his life, penicillin, Advil, sunscreen, polio vaccine, keep going down the list of things that virtually everyone can take advantage of today that he never had. But you can't say that the average American is living better than Rockefeller today because we have all of these technologies that he never did. Because we just look at what other people have and assume that that is the baseline. So you can imagine a world in which my kids, my grandkids are earning twice as much as me, adjusted for inflation, and they're no happier for it. Because the new technologies, whatever it will be, that would seem like magic to you and I will just become their baseline. And that's always been the case. If Thomas Jefferson or somebody came to the year 2023, he would faint at the new technologies and the medical discoveries that we have. And these are technologies that you and I don't spend 1 second being grateful for because we've just accepted them as a new baseline.